Hi, everybody. Thank you for the few of you who are here. Looks like we are a losing crowd, and probably people want to get back and end of the day get back to happy hours or go home or whatnot. But thank you for being here. I'll go through it quickly so you don't have to hang out too long. We can always stop and do Q&A and talk to me later. Just want to be talking about a few things that we are doing over at UC San Diego. I'm part of San Diego Supercomputer Center there. So just some of our experience in managing hybrid cloud platforms and deploying applications, including some use cases with Hadoop and such. So I'll touch on that. So we'll try to focus on some of the challenges organizations face. We focus a little more on healthcare because we come from running cloud environments and systems for healthcare organizations and more focused on security. So we'll talk about protecting data, meeting compliance in a cloud setting. Then we'll talk about some use cases, how we've applied some of these technologies in some of the customers and the projects we've worked with, and the role we see for organizations like ourselves, which are trying to help customers build this, manage this environment, and help them kind of use the infrastructure and the cloud capability, and then some Q&A. Very quickly about me, Sandeep Chandra. I'm with San Diego Supercomputer Center, which has a long history of high-performance computing. So that's the history of the organization. They're one of the early institutions established by the National Science Foundation. And over the years, it's evolved into doing a lot of things. They do a lot of work in data, cyber infrastructure, computation, things like that. So they've diversified and security and all of that. So I run a division there, and we run a platform there called Sherlock Cloud, which is a managed cloud platform, a hybrid solution now that runs on-premise and in the cloud in AWS. And we focus on academia, research, and some industry partnerships, and really dealing with healthcare data or healthcare organizations or organizations that have protected information, PHI, PII. I studied in North Carolina, but I've been with SDSC for 15 years, so it's really built my career there. And I have interest. My background is in computer science systems, and I've done infrastructure. I've done a lot of middleware, but now last few years focused a lot more on compliance, cloud, and now trying to do things in big data. So diving in, I think many of us here who must have seen some of these things. If you're dealing, if you're in an organization, if you're dealing with protected data, you have the cloud challenges. Do we do it on-premise, in the cloud? What's the solution? Then when you start going into protected data, you have compliance requirements that come in. Now we are seeing a number of sessions here on GDPR. That's bringing in a number of requirements on organizations that hold data and manage data. But I think it's really about services on top. I think we all know that we need the cloud, we need the services on top of it, but the value-added stuff really is in how can we do big data analysis, analytics, machine learning, data science. How can we get to that faster while assuming everything under it is managed and protected? In terms of organizational capability, if you look at it, what do organizations need to have to be working in this space, especially when it comes to sensitive information? Cloud computing, obviously they need to know compliance, cybersecurity. If you're doing it on-premise, you need to understand infrastructure, hardware, software, professional services. We all know that it takes people who have this knowledge, who understand these things, to glue it all together to really have a working platform. And value-added capabilities. How do you do high-touch services, the more impactful services, machine learning, deep learning, things like that. So you really have to have that kind of capability in an organization. And that's where we have tried to now establish ourselves a managed service that focuses on providing security and compliance and managing that whole stack, and then building advanced solutions within that, and that's been our focus. Some of the things we've done, and I'll speak a lot more to it, but we've tried to be in the space of cloud. We know everybody wants to move to the cloud. We bring security and compliance as our expertise. And now, how do we process big data in that kind of an environment? So we've been trying to focus on some of those things. As you start dealing with public cloud infrastructure and public cloud platforms, one of the things you'll notice from them is, they talk about compliance, they talk about security, but their idea of compliance is a shared model where they provide security of the cloud, where they provide compliance for their components at the infrastructure level, storage, compute, networking, but they expect you to build your own stack on top of it using either services from their marketplace or you bring in your own license. And all those together give you end-to-end compliance. And I think a lot of times when people start this journey, they may or may not be aware of this. And really, what you really need from compliance, like I was just saying, is you take the basic components that cloud vendors provide you, and then you build a whole suite of services on top. Things like authentication, multi-factor authentication, auditing, log management, vulnerability management. So you've got to build all those services that help you keep it secure and keep it compliant. And then on top of that, obviously, you want to pull in the additional services like big data, machine learning, whatever is your business need to complete the stack. So that's kind of how I think we see it from a service management point of view. This gets a little technical, but I think the idea here is, when you talk about secure environments, our experience has been in supporting FISMA programs and working with the government with fairly sensitive information. So, we've built a fairly segmented, highly secure environment that consists of a lot of segmentation. So you will see here that we have a lot of segmentation going across from your dev, test, production environments, as well as your presentation layer, app layer, and data layer. So a lot of segmentation, so that, that's defense in depth. Also, how users access it, how administrators access it, there's a lot of difference there. There's a whole suite of services we run to manage this environment on the right here. And then we create specific environments for projects. But the good thing about this is, once this is built and it's built to the right kind of scale, then we can just spin these off for multiple customers, and they inherit all of this capability. So it's build once, be able to deploy, and it's a fairly scalable architecture. So we did this for a long time on our on-premise. About 3 years back, when we wanted to take this to the cloud, we approached AWS at that time, who has a BAA with the larger organization that we are part of, and obviously they were fairly mature. They are mature, and they've been doing this for a long time. And so we went to them and said, we want to be able to. We have experience in running secure environments. We want to take that knowledge. We want to leverage your services out of the box, and we want to build the same architecture in AWS. So we kind of got in an engagement with them, and we architected how we thought we run secure environments on-premise. We duplicated that in AWS. So the end result was we were able to have 2 secure environments, one running on-premise, one running in AWS, both being built to the NIST 800-53 standard, which is at the FISMA level, which is the NIST standard for managing highly secure environments. So that's really how we built this. And the result was, what we did was brought these two together to build a hybrid solution. So we've been able to offer this and have customers use AWS if that's what they want to do. But we've also come across use cases where it made sense to host them on-premise for whatever reason. They had specific computing needs, or they had specific hardware needs they wanted to bring in. So we had both those options. And so we were able to leverage both these. And they are fairly well integrated. We have some licensing on-premise for software that we've been able to extend into the cloud. And then there are some capabilities from cloud, which where we can expand and burst and provide that scale. So that's where AWS is valuable. It gives you the built-in tools, the automation, the level of maturity that we didn't have on-premise. A lot of it was automated, but at a smaller scale. Obviously, one of the things we want to be careful here is try to be more kind of aware of how do we manage costs in AWS. So I think, again, these mature cloud platforms give you a very fine-grained level of auditing. So you can tag your various assets, your customers that you're dealing with, so you don't, you have a very, at the end of the day when you look at your usage report, it gives you a nice breakdown of how their usage has been. So you can leverage some of those things. But I think as we go forward, this has been operational. We've been using this and getting more and more comfortable the last couple of years. Again, it's about building services on top of it, whether we try to package some of these big data platforms or an analytics solution or a machine learning workbench. We're trying to put that together so that the time to start, the time to begin your actual work is reduced significantly. Some of the enterprise products that go into managing our environments, both from a security standpoint and an operational standpoint, is just a listing of those things. But it kind of highlights that it's a collection of some of the best enterprise products out there in terms of auditing, log management, what we have to do from a vulnerability management point of view, and AV and backup and all of that. And same with security. A lot of segmentation, a lot of firewall, IDS systems to look at your traffic going in and out of the environment. So there's a lot of work that goes on there. In terms of some actual technical controls, just to give you a few examples of what we do and what secure environments and compliance requires you to do is really spend a lot of time on these. System maintenance. You've got to patch these vulnerabilities, zero-day vulnerabilities, critical patches, log collection. We were just talking about that. Intrusion detection, using jump boxes to isolate how you get in. There is no direct SSH access to our systems. For developers and admins, we make them come through two-factor authentication, through an IPsec tunnel, to a jump box, and from there they have access to their resources. So it's about controlling those things. Data at rest encryption, running AV and malware. We also harden our OS. So we remove a lot of the unnecessary services and ports that you don't need on the systems. We block them. And then annually, you have to perform audits, cybersecurity audit, your risk assessment. So this is the reality of what you have to do when you're dealing with sensitive information. So let's look at some of the examples of applications that we support. We've done a number of these things. We've supported the government in fighting medical fraud, cancer research, risk management, population health. So a lot of healthcare focus, but just to give you a little bit of a sample. So here's an effort we are currently doing with a group called California Teacher Study. It's a partnership with City of Hope, which is a cancer hospital and a research organization in Los Angeles. And they are studying a cohort of about 180,000 teachers, and they've been tracking them for 20 plus years and just collecting survey information and tracking what things they've gone through and how has their health changed, progressed, or gotten worse, and just kind of tracking that information. So for the longest time, 20 plus years, all this was just sitting in different systems and different participating organizations that were involved in this effort. And in the last 2 years, this was all pulled together in one single location, and we built a data model behind it, pulled all the data in, so there is now one consolidated place for users to be able to come, do their studies, run different type of analysis and things like that. But some of the things we've done here is, this runs in our cloud. They use a number of other public and products to capture other data. They use Salesforce, for instance, to track their cohort and their patient, their cohort engagement. So all of the surveys is coming through another application called Qualtrics, where you can fill out survey. So we are able to connect to these other systems, these other public systems, and pull that data in real time as they submit, and it's coming all into this unified environment. So it's been interesting to get this all to work from where it was, while at the same time integrating with these other public products and services to bring it all together, all being done in a very secure environment. So kind of have to work through some of those challenges. Another initiative we have is with the medical device company called NIHON KOHDEN. They are a Japanese medical device firm. They have a pretty big presence in North America, but they have a US lab where they hadn't done this till now, where they want to be able to pull in data from all their devices at the various hospitals into an exchange, and from that exchange they want to bring this into a secure location and start looking at kind of this data aggregated, and have their subject matter experts just look at how are different hospitals producing this data. Are they seeing something interesting? Obviously, there's a lot of value if they could do this and turn this around and go back to the hospitals to say, here's a view of all your products, monitoring devices, feeding and being collected in one single place. So a lot of things here, we host this in AWS. They're streaming, so we are trying to use some of the inbuilt libraries that AWS offers to capture data from their devices, from their exchanges, and stream that in real time. And now we have to figure out, okay, once we stream it, can we ingest it and pull it into a data model, whether it's HDFS or whatever else we end up building. But another example of real-time data coming in, streaming services, leveraging Hadoop and HDFS to build out the backend. And we hope that we do this, and they are looking at options of how do they make this into a product that they can go and kind of give it to hospitals to say you can deploy this. And the one effort that I'll spend a few more slides showing a little bit of the details is this initiative we have with UCOP Risk Services, which is the Office of the President, the kind of the administrative head of the University of California system. And the risk services group there oversees the risk for the entire organization, which is a pretty big initiative in itself. So they have medical centers, and so collaboration between UCOP, the head office, and the medical centers to be able to pull all this lots of data that they have at each location, including medical incidents, patient feedback, claims, settlements, everything that each of these campus organizations is dealing with that they collect in their campus. They want one single aggregated view. So it's anticipated to be a lot of data over time. And so we work with them to build this platform where we pulled it all together in a Hadoop environment. And they build the stack using not this product, but another competitor. But now they're focusing on expanding the lake, bringing in more of the data sources, really exposing that to the applications. So really, I think some of the things we learned going through this was getting a Hadoop type of environment to work in a very secure and segmented environment, right? So if I show you, and obviously this was built on-premise, and we are looking to expand this into the cloud and probably use that as the future mode of operation. But just to show you, this diagram is very similar to what I had shown earlier. We deployed this in our typical architecture, which is to build out these cluster, again, segmented. So you will see that we have a bunch of Hadoop clusters that are segmented, running in dev, test, UAT, and production. And there are specific requirements here about sensitive data being only in production. So, this was a natural fit in that sense, because in our environment, there is no easy way to jump from one environment to the other, from dev to test or test to production. So you have that isolation built in and that segmentation built in. So all of that was built, and then they moved data, they de-identify and move data into the other environments. But getting all this configured with the the very restrictive nature of this environment was a learning curve. But I think now that we've gone through this, it's hopefully we are able to kind of build on this and package this together to be able to do these faster in the future. And obviously the BI stack running on top of it and being consumed. So it's Hadoop, it's BI, it's a lot of authentication, authorization being built into this, and there's a lot of complexity and unique to this environment. But we are leveraging the typical Hadoop ecosystem that you hear about here, and if you're in this space. But we got HDFS, Hive, Impala, some of those things for data processing, Spark for a lot of the data work, Solar for some of the search capabilities, Sentry, Apache, authorization through Kerberos and LDAP. We use KMS on the environment, and single sign-on and things like that. So all of this has to come together, and that's what the team has been working on. Another thing that we've added in the last few months is really an architecture to set up a disaster recovery, a backup framework in AWS. So this all runs in on-premise, and we are in the process of building a backup system. Again, we have to deal with some of the constraints of this data being sensitive. So how do we back up? How do we make sure that when it's copied through to the storage, to S3 in Amazon, how is it secure, how is it encrypted, to make sure that if somebody gets access, they don't have access to the data. So a lot of that is going in place. But this is all great because eventually I think we want to operate this whole thing in AWS, so it's a good exercise for us to go through. But just to highlight, some of the things again that happen in the back end as a managed service that we have to try to work on. Everything in green that you see is really the responsibility of an organization that's trying to manage this. A number of management services that cover your day-to-day operations, VMs, authentication, auditing, things like that, security services, all the firewalls, the log management, VPN services, anything that help protect the boundary and protect the systems inside. And the idea is that, at the end of the day, you want to package this and just do this in the back end, and that the customers are really just looking at kind of what the business is, what they need to do for their applications and things like that. So I'll leave with this, which is we have come to a point where I think some of the compliance and security is becoming commodity. These public clouds are doing more and more of these things kind of from the ground up. So I think the value will be in adding services on top. We are trying to automate the security, the deployment, and kind of really package solutions so that we can focus on value-added services. So that's kind of where we are going, thinking of if we were to build all this out and be able to produce these platforms, can we get to analytics as a service, ML as a service, data science as a service? Can we focus more on those? So when somebody comes to us, it's a turnkey solution where they bring in the data, they're ready to actually spend cycles on the real stuff. So some of the things we look at is to do things like big data platform as a service in the context of compliance and secure environments, either using some of the capabilities that AWS offers for Hadoop, Cloudera, or Hortonworks, whichever I think customer driven. And also the idea of using containers to be able to port these things between, people may start up with AWS, but Azure might be who they sign a BAA with. So to be able to containerize all this so you can move these things between various cloud platforms. And another thing that we come across quite a bit is just researchers and staff asking for a secure desktop in which they can do their quick analysis. I want to install a machine learning library, a workbench. I want to bring in my data and just run some quick analysis. And so we are trying to move to this model of here's your secure desktop. It runs in the cloud. You log in, you bring in your data, you do all your analysis. When you disconnect, it all stays there. There's nothing on your laptop. So we're looking at AWS workspaces and some other options there to really. So trying to move up the stack, and that's what the focus has been. But that's all I had. I'm Happy to answer any questions. Yes?
When you were doing or working with KOHDEN, are you or were you considering like using something like Minify, NIHON, or did that not?
So the question was, when we were working with our medical device company for streaming, did we consider using NIHON or not? Not really, because we were more dependent on what their exchange was going to produce, whether it's going to stream data in an HL7 format or what. So we were really coming at it from what is the output, what do you stream, what do you expose your data as, and what can we use out of AWS. So we are still looking at it. I think we were looking at Kinesis and a few other options out of AWS to use that. And I'm not sure what we finally agreed on. I think they were looking at some open source options as well. But I think that would just be dependent on what we are trying to stream from and what options are available to capture it.
Okay.
Great. All right. Thank you. Thank you for your time.